to be a I'll also like to introduce the panel today. We have Catherine from UNEP-WCMC, who is the technical lead to develop the methodology. We have Tiffany from CEPREP, who also contributed towards the methodology by giving us very valuable comments. We also have Mr. Karma Wangchuk, who is the national focal point from Bhutan, who also collaborated with us on the methodology. And we also have from Vanuatu, also a party that supported us to co-develop the methodology. So it will be quite an informal session. We will introduce the methodology, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. And we'll also hear from the parties about their experience in using the methodology, if it was useful, if there were any challenges, and what were the challenges that they foresee to use it. Before we begin, I would like to ask Tina from Women for Biodiversity to formally welcome everyone.
Good afternoon, everybody. I apologize if you had any trouble finding the room in this heat, but looking at the turn up of participation to this event, thank you, because it takes a lot to make a time out of also the ongoing negotiations that is taking place. So from my side, from Women for Biodiversity, I first would like to thank all the presenters who have also been part of this process. So Minal already gave you the introduction of the methodology. And hopefully in today's event, we will just update you on the peer review. And also it's important because this is a crucial indicator methodology that would support the implementation of the NBSAP, the National Biodiversity Strategies and Action Plans, that you may have seen is a crucial point of discussion at the COP16. Now, just quickly, very briefly, just the importance of why we are doing this. As you saw if you're following the monitoring framework, currently there is no like a headline indicator for target 23, but the component indicator for target 23 was adopted at COP15. Now, what I want to also remind everybody is that we're not looking for the adoption of the indicator. It is already there in the component indicator. What we want to try is to retain that and basically fill the missing gap. The gap was that indicator did not have a methodology. And so over from COP15 to COP16, we have come prepared. We are saying that this is the indicator that you adopted at COP15. There was no metadata. And you know what? Now we have it. So it's about time that to implement the gender responsive of the KM-GBF fully, whole of society, ensuring that women are part of implementation, we have this. So that is what we are really looking at, is that for parties to adopt the methodology for the component indicator on the implementation of the gender plan of action. So I'm hoping that in these 2 weeks, we will be looking at what's going to be discussed. And without further ado, thank you so much once again. And sorry, I also forgot one more thing. We do have the information on the background information document prepared by Women for Biodiversity and UNEP-WCMC, a technical paper. We did print them out, and if you are in the mailing list, we will send them out for you to also lobby, understand it a bit more better. And with that, Minal, I pass it back to you. Thank you so much for being part of this event.
Thank you, Tina. We'll go right into the methodology. Catherine, please introduce it and let us know about the updates as well.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here. And as Tina mentioned, the key motivation to support parties with the development of this methodology was precisely to fill a gap. Parties made very strong commitments related to gender equality and the gender responsive implementation of the Global Biodiversity Framework at COP15. In the Global Biodiversity Framework with Target 23, Target 22, and the adoption of the Gender Plan of Action. But through following the process from the previous COP to this COP, we've noticed that there are gaps in terms of the measures to know if we're progressing towards the implementation and the achievement of Target 23 and the implementation of those actions that parties are meant to be taking and others towards ensuring the gender responsive implementation of the GBF. So first of all, I wanted to thank the team from UNEP-WCMC, Claudia Faustino, Aisha Wejeskera, and Kiri Booth, who drove the technical process of co-development of this methodology. And of course, Women4Biodiversity, you are all here. So I'll tell you a little bit about the updates and the process. Next slide, please. So what we're going to discuss is, for those of you that might not be familiar with the methodology, just a quick recap, tell you about the process of co-development, the feedback that was received in the process of co-development, and some of the key updates for those of you that have seen previous versions of the methodology. And lastly, where you can access the indicator. We just want to make sure that it's used. Next slide, please. What we've noticed through the process of co-development is that this indicator brings together, joins those key commitments that have been made. So Target 23, and which focuses on the gender equality through a gender responsive approach of the GBF. This indicator links Target 23 with the Gender Plan of Action. The Gender Plan of Action, through its outcomes, objectives, and actions, addresses all the key components of Target 23. So if this plan is implemented at the national level, there is going to be progress towards the Target 23 and very likely its achievement. And it also links with those indicators, the measures that tells us if we're tracking, if we're indeed progressing towards the achievement of this target. Next slide, please. This has already been mentioned by Tina and Menal. The indicator was included in the monitoring framework, but it lacked a methodology. But I want to take this opportunity to show some of the gaps that we were mentioning in terms of measures, indicators to track progress towards the achievement of Target 23. As it was mentioned already, Target 23 didn't include a headline indicator because this was a new target, an innovative target, and for that reason, parties that are governments that are parties to the CBD process didn't previously use an indicator that was similar to this. So we didn't have an indicator that could meet the criteria for a headline indicator. So parties agreed that instead they would use a binary indicator. This is composed of 4 questions that parties are being requested to answer in the national reports. And the questions are very broad. It's about the mechanisms, the policies and legal instruments, and measures that are being taken to ensure the gender responsive implementation of the GBF. The other indicators that have been included in the monitoring framework are those that are ready and available for use within the SDG, the Sustainable Development Goals indicator framework. But the issue is that those indicators lack data. Those are the indicators that relate to people and the environment, and those are the indicators that within the SDG process are lacking data. And that's why it was so important to have an indicator fully operational that countries could use to deep dive into the elements that would drive a gender responsive process. Next slide, please. So I'll tell you now about the process of co-development. The first step was UNEP-WCMC colleagues developed documents that would serve as a basis for the co-development process. So they drafted the metadata. This is the information about the methodology and how this indicator would function. And they also develop a calculation tool that it would provide the actual measure, the indicator, which is a score from 0 to 100% of progress towards the national implementation of the Gender Plan of Action. So those were the two key documents that were provided for review, input, and co-development with parties, observers, and major groups. Next slide, please. The indicator is composed of two things. The first element is a questionnaire that is based on the indicative actions in the Gender Plan of Action. For those of you that are familiar with the Gender Plan of Action, there are 30 actions that are meant to be implemented. The Gender Plan of Action is organized under 3 outcomes. There are specific objectives that are meant to be met within those expected outcomes. And there are a number of actions within those outcomes that are going to help us to achieve the objectives and achieve the outcomes. Out of those 30 questions, 18 of those actions, 30, there are 30 actions, and out of those 30 actions, 18 are meant to be nationally driven by governments. So what the questionnaire includes is 18 questions that relate to those 18 actions that are meant to be led by governments at the national level. Once answers are provided to the questionnaire, using the calculation tool, countries can get an index score. So part of the methodology is a process, steps to calculate this index. Next slide, please. Just a reminder that this is what the Gender Plan of Action looks like. As you can see, is organized by 3 expected outcomes. Here we're showing expected outcome 1. There are a number of objectives, indicative actions, and you can see in the last column, we have the responsible actors. And here we only took those 18 actions where parties are the lead responsible actor. Next slide, please. So what we did in terms of drafting the questions in the questionnaire, the feedback that we received from parties is that they find it useful that we're reminding them on the text that was adopted in the Gender Plan of Action, but they also wanted a way to understand and unpack what these actions mean. So what the team did was to remind parties of the outcome, what is the objective that is meant to be achieved, and you see that information there. And in terms of the action, the potential deliverable, and the parties, this information was addressed in the form of a question and unpacked in the option answers. So some of the feedback that we received was that we needed to make sure that the indicator answer options was aligned with the methodology that is being proposed and the answer options for the binary indicator. So the binary indicator is composed of 4 questions, and parties are being asked to answer these questions with 4 options: fully, partially, under development, and no. And we follow the same information. And lastly, we provided a reminder that if possible, countries should provide evidence and examples in the relevant section of their national reports. This is the annex and where they're going to be reporting on the Gender Plan of Action. Next slide, please. I think, yeah. So in terms of the process of co-development, we carried out consultations, information sessions, and a peer review process throughout April to August this year. The methodology started being developed from December last year, but the full feedback consultation and testing with parties happened between April and August this year. Most of the feedback was received through bilateral consultations and testing with parties, through virtual sessions, an in-person session at SAPSA 26, and we received a lot of feedback from the peer review process, which was open from July to August, or June to August. I don't remember. It was, I think, a couple of months. Next slide, please. In terms of the overview of the feedback, we received feedback from 28 entities. 19 of them were parties. All feedback through information sessions, from peer review, from the testing sessions, was systematically compiled so that we could carefully consider what was the feedback and how this could be addressed in the updated methodology. The overall feedback was positive, and especially parties noted that apart from being an indicator that is useful for assessing and tracking progress towards Target 23, it was a useful tool. First of all, to be able to answer more in a meaningful way those 4 questions that they are required to report on in their national reports. Second of all, it helped them remember the different commitments and actions that are meant to be implemented at the national level, and help them with planning. What are the actions? What are the different entities that need to be involved? Thinking about the coordination for implementing those actions, and also highlighting what are the gaps and where further work is needed. Next slide, please. Some of the key updates that we've made on the methodology based on the feedback received is that we've provided ways to unpack the questions and what is meant to be achieved through the answers. So yes, we're providing the options of fully, partially, under development, and no, based on the binary indicator answers. But the questionnaire provides information of what fully would mean, what does partially mean, and under development, and also within the note where we remind parties to provide examples, we provide a little bit of guidance of what sort of examples we would hope to see in international reports. The other key feedback was that parties didn't want to duplicate efforts, so they were asking us to ensure a mapping to help them understand what are the different questions, how are they aligned with the binary indicator, so that they can use the information that they use in this indicator to report on their national reports, or the other way around, be able to use the answers that they are using for the binary indicator to answer the questions for this indicator as well. And then we received a lot of input, especially from the UK, to make the computation method, like the actual index, more robust. Next slide, please. This is what the questionnaire looks like. As you can see, we provide a reminder of what the expected outcome is. The different questions have been nested within the expected, the different objectives. Those questions that are linked to the binary indicators have been marked. We're reminding parties which question from the binary indicator links to. And as you can see at the bottom, we're just providing a reminder that if available, please provide evidence and examples in your 7th and 8th national reports in the annex of the Gender Plan of Action. Next slide, please. In the calculation tool, we have also reminded parties the linkages between the different questions and the questions from the binary indicator. But something important that was that emerged from the testing with parties is that the use of this indicator and the process of using the indicator would help them, especially to answer question 23.3. That is the question that asks if parties are taking a gender responsive approach on the implementation of the GBF. So by using this indicator as a tool to understand their gaps, help them with planning processes and their mechanisms, they are going to be able to, in a meaningful way, also answer question 23.3 of the binary indicator. Next slide, please. This is what the calculation tool looks like. So the team developed a spreadsheet that provides information of how the calculation tool works. It includes the questionnaire with the different questions and option answers, and it includes a tab where they can select the answer fully, partially, etc. And then it calculates a score. So the points are used to add up the score. Zero is it correlates to no. Under development, it's provided a 1 point for that answer. Partially gets 2 points and fully 3 points. And the calculation tool reminds them of what the total amount of points are, and then the second step is that depending on the answers, a proportion out of the total number of points is given, and that helps to get to the final index score, which is in the form of a percentage for communication processes, so that it's easy to communicate what does this mean. How far are we in terms of how far along are we in the process of implementing the gender plan of action at the national level. Next slide, please. The calculation tool is very easy because basically parties will need to just choose the different options. There are some questions that have a single choice answer. There are other ones that are select all that apply, and the calculation tool provides those options. And that's it. The calculation tool does everything else, but of course, the metadata provides all of the information of how to calculate the index scores for those parties that want to develop their own tools and calculate the index scores by themselves. Next slide, please. This is what once the calculation tool is used and the answers are completed, this is the information that parties would get. In the example that we're providing here, based on the answers of a country, let's call it country A, they got an index score of 74.51% regarding progress on the national implementation of the gender plan of action. But the calculation tool provides other ways to interpret information for those parties that don't want to use a percentage. So they could use it as a traffic light system where, in this case, country A is making good progress towards the full implementation of the gender plan of action. This is green in the traffic light system. Countries also wanted to see progress towards the different outcomes from the gender plan of action because they've noticed that it was likely that most countries will do well on outcome 1, but it might be a little bit trickier on in terms of progress towards outcome 2 and outcome 3. So they wanted to be able to see progress towards the different outcomes to help them plan towards those gaps. And lastly, parties will also be able to see the amount of progress towards each action, and that's what you see on the last figure. Next slide, please. And yes, as mentioned already, the indicator is available. You can find information here, and this is a call for parties to please use it. What we've noticed through testing with parties is that it's going to be useful to track progress towards Target 23, but beyond that, is going to be useful as a tool to enhance coordination between the relevant ministries and entities that need to collaborate from the environment and the ministries of women affairs towards implementing the gender plan of action and taking actions that drive them towards the gender responsive implementation of the global biodiversity framework. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Catherine. Before we move on to a discussion, we have Vincent from CBD who has joined us because Jillian couldn't. So thank you for being here, Vincent. And if you can just talk about this.
Yes, of course. Good morning, everyone. So Jillian is really sorry not to be here, but as you may know, COP are already a very busy moment for the Secretariat. So I will try to represent her. From our point of view, where we are looking at the national targets that have been implemented in our online reporting tool, we can say two things. First, there are major gaps between parties in the way they implement the target 23. And many parties did not have any gender approach on their national targets or in their NBSAPs. So there are major work to do now, and we need many things to that. We need a guidance, and the Jordan plan is this guidance, so we can rely on it, but we also know some exchange on good practices. We know some tools for every parties to self-assess where they are, what they want to do in on every aspects of their national targets or NBSAPs. And so, thank you for this presentation, because this is a major step forward in this direction. So now we will need to improve that eventually, but also for parties to know that and to use that, and for exchanging every good practices that you might have in this room or in another place of the COP. So as the Secretariat, we are really happy to see that you can talk about it, and please exchange everything, tools and good practice that you can have to implement better the target 23 and goal C. Thank you.
Thank you, Vincent. We do have parties who have collaborated with us to develop the methodology. So I would want to give the floor to Mr. Wangchuk, who is the national focal point for NBSAPs in Bhutan, to just tell us about your experience in using the metadata and if you found it useful in the context of Bhutan.
Thank you, Minal and Tina, and all the organizers for having me here. I'm really, really humbled. Let me begin with that. So, as Minal said, I work as the coordinator for developing Bhutan's NBSAP, and I work with a consortium of domain experts for the development, and we have experts from ecosystem, Department of Water, environment, and again all the domain expertise. So one of their prime responsibilities while developing the NBSAP is they help us guide through those respective thematic areas while developing target strategies and action. Let's say we are talking about protected areas. We need a domain expertise, a scientist who can actually guide us what's the conservation landscape. And besides that, their job also is to see the interconnectedness of the other targets. How does climate affect biodiversity or water or pollution? So that's a brief background on, the consortium of the National Task Force for the Development of NBSAP. One of, I would say, the best decision we made as a country and as this coordination team is to include a gender specialist as a full-time member of this National Task Force for the Development of NBSAP. And we have that gender specialist from Bhutan here, Miss Ishe. I'm sure if you attended yesterday's session, you would have seen her. She is a wonderful and a passionate human being. I really feed off of her energy. So again, as a country, if you really want to promote and push women and gender agenda, you should first have representation. You should have women and particularly gender specialists, have them at the seat at the table, right? And Ms. Isha's job is not just to look at target 23, but to look at the interconnectedness of all the other 22 targets and review that through a gender lens so that every strategy's actions, or for that matter, with the theme of today's session, indicators, are reviewed and screened through a gender lens. So that's the first best step we took as an organization, as a country, for developing the NBSAP. Coming back to the main question, sorry, I'm taking a rather long time to answer this. So again, as we do with any kind of review, we took this methodology while we were testing it, me and Ishe, and we took that to our consortium, the National Task Force of about 15 other domain specialists and experts. And boy, it was a moment of reflection. Only 19 countries took that, did that testing with that methodologies. Even if you are a country and you do not want to adopt these methodologies and indicators, you should still try and test that methodology, because it shows you where you are in terms of having those legal instruments and the frameworks that actually enable women to participate. Again, like I said, you don't have to adopt it, although you should. But even if you don't want to, you should at least take that, because it was a moment of reflection. It really showed us, we talk about, well, our organization, our country, it stands for, all for women and equality. And when you actually categorically answer those questions and you come with a score, it actually gives you the status. The numbers don't lie. So we actually did it very consultatively. We took this to a broader group. One advice, if it's not too late, if you want to still test it, and if other countries who want to do this, I would suggest and recommend having as many women participants in that consortium. Speaking as a man, again, I feel really bad for sharing this platform with this wonderful women in this group, but sometimes our responses can be biased, and there is no better person to answer those questions, if those instruments and frameworks are there or not, how effective are they. And I'll tell you, you would benefit a lot if you have many women participants in that review and participating in that consultative review of those methodologies. Summarizing, again, my response, yes, it was a very enriching and a learning experience while we were testing it. It was an eye-opener for a lot of us, including myself. And right now, I'm not sure if Catherine, the final index, it also, there's a descriptive behind that index, right? What those numbers mean. If you fall between this and this, you are so and so in that stage. And that actually hits you hard, if you're really into this policy making and planning and coordination. It actually gives you a broader view of where you stand. So yeah, it was a great learning experience, and we hope to keep collaborating. And if there are few opportunities for us to maybe again contribute in a much better way to this methodology, so we are open and we're happy to do that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Wangchuk. Ms. Yeshe, would you like to say a few words? Okay. Thank you so much. We also have Ms. Roxana Solis from Peru, who also tested the methodology for us. Oh, okay. I think she had to leave, but thank you. Ale, if you could just tell her thanks from our side. We have Ms. Tiffany here from SEPREP, who also helped us a lot with looking at methodologies, multiple drafts of it. So thank you so much. And if you could just share your experience, and also what Mr. Karma spoke about was the entire KM-GBF and looking at the different indicators in a gender responsive manner. If you could just tell us a little bit about that as well.
Certainly. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. I want to express my gratitude to the organizers and to the fellow panelists, but also to thank you for the gift of your time. Gracias por su tiempo. There's a lot to say here. I served as part of the ad hoc technical expert group on indicators for the last couple of years, and we saw the difficult work that we have ahead of us to measure our progress towards the vision that we set for ourselves. And we see monitoring as a way to create those encounters, as we just heard, to hear that challenge to ourselves. When we try to measure our progress, we understand better the actions that we need to take and how we need to work together across ministries and across communities and across countries. So we see monitoring as a really powerful tool and process. And the first message that I want to share today is, let's begin, right? It's tempting to wait until we have a good way to measure all aspects of all elements of women's relationship with nature, the impacts of biodiversity loss on women, as well as the many contributions that women and girls make to a positive and peaceful future that we have with nature. We can't measure all of that today, but let's begin. And this indicator, this methodology that has been developed is a really powerful way, I see, for us to identify the steps that countries are taking and help countries encounter the next best action that they can take on. I also want to remind ourselves that this is not just about Target 23, and it is not just about going to 2030. The goals of the framework go to 2050. The targets only go to 2030, but we have a longer vision. We have this gender plan of action, which is an actionable structure to help us move towards equity for women in all their diversity under the CBD, and that's going to reach far beyond 2030. The third point I want to make here is that women's engagement and a national understanding of women's needs and perspectives relies on an understanding of their expertise and capacity, as well as a national respect for that capacity. This means many things. It relates to monitoring. We need a way to measure that capacity and understand it, express it, and communicate it. We need a way to assess the needs of women, the perspectives of women, the impacts of biodiversity loss on women. So I would say in terms of capacity, this means ensuring intergenerational transfer of the knowledge and practices that women have. And I'm really encouraged by question 1.5 in the indicator methodology that you have here, which asks countries how they are investing and how they are understanding that transfer of knowledge. I also want to remind us that it means ensuring that women and girls have the technical and scientific capacity and have a future in the technical and scientific workforces that we need for biodiversity management, for biodiversity monitoring, for effective development of businesses and practices that use biodiversity in a sustainable way. We do know that science has an equity problem. Women are underrepresented in many technical and scientific disciplines. I don't know how much time to take here, but I want to remind us that we do have some guidance that exists. We've heard a call for more guidance from parties, and I see that this indicator methodology helps to provide that. It's so valuable to have these questions, a reminder of these questions, putting it in front of us again is useful. Unpacking what that means and what that can look like is useful. And hearing what other countries are doing is so tremendously helpful to policymakers. I do just want to mention a few other pieces of guidance that I'm aware of, and I hope to hear from you what guidance you have from your regions as well. I'm here as part of a delegation supporting the 14 Pacific Small Island Developing States, and I want to again thank Vanuatu for taking on the testing of this indicator. We have some great gender champions in the region. There's this new toolkit that is, the title of it is Mainstreaming Gender in Development, the Pacific Way. It's produced by the Pacific community, and it seeks to help countries make that link of building in that gender lens for the work that we do in development overall, and of course that has implications for biodiversity management. I also can't help but share this because we just produced it. Today's the first time I've seen it in its printed form, so I'm very happy to share this. This is a document that was prepared for the G20 Working Group on Women's Empowerment, but it definitely is applicable towards many others as well. It looks at the status and trends of women and girls in education and throughout their careers, how they are represented and participating in the challenges that they face in scientific and technical workforces. I'm very happy to connect you with this publication. And I want to remind us, I know we're under the CBD, but we have relevant calls to action. We can remind our countries of other commitments that they have made and other work that we've done. So I wanted to remind us of UNESCO's work. UNESCO has the recommendation on open science, which calls for dialogue across knowledge systems, and it calls for equity in the development of science, in the communication of science, and the participation in scientific processes, including resourcing and decision making. And this year, UNESCO has released a call to action with defined next steps that we can take to close the gender gap in science. And I see this as really important for our work in biodiversity as an important part of science. I want to go back to one of the points you made about that first step is ensuring that women have a seat at the table, ensuring that women are represented. And I hear from your experience in Bhutan that women were not just represented, they were engaged. They were really part of this decision-making process. So I want to take us the next steps as well. Are women included and represented? Are women engaged in the process? If they speak, are they heard? Do we have a pathway to hear their voices and adjust what we do? And are women served? Because it is possible for women to be at the table or not at the table and to be served or not served with the resulting policies and decisions that we make. And the next step beyond that would be, are women empowered? Are women leading in the decision making and the choices that we make for our next steps in our relationship with nature? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Tiffany. I think what the points that you brought up about women being at the center stage of technical and scientific expertise is also so important to talk about. Um, we can have a few questions from the anybody here who wants to specifically ask about any aspect of the methodology right now. So if there are any questions, or even if there are questions from the parties, to look at, you have seen the updated methodology, and if there is anything specific that you want to ask as well. So the floor is open.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jess Dempsey. I work at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, Canada. Thanks for all this work. My question is related to I'm curious to know about the indicator about gender discrimination and violence, in particular because where I live in Canada, it's been documented, it's very clear. In fact, the state itself has recognized the way that resource extraction is tied up with this huge amount of gender violence, particularly around murdered and missing Indigenous women. And so I'm curious to know how that issue has been addressed or adopted by states, or how you see that incorporated in these indicators. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the question. And yes, that's one of the actions that is included in the Gender Plan of Action. And what this indicator does, it reminds of the action, what does it mean, and tries to unpack some of the options. But unfortunately, this is a process indicator that focuses on the different actions that are included in the Gender Plan of Action. But with this specific action, we ask parties for evidence and examples of the measures that they are taking at the national level, and to provide that information in the national reports in the Gender Plan of Action section. So I hope that by the midterm review of implementation of the Gender Plan of Action, we can see some of the approaches that countries are taking to ensure prevention and elimination of gender-based violence related to the environment, and gender-based violence in overall, but with specific examples on the environment. Tiffany, is there something?
Sure, I can add just briefly there. Thank you for raising this point. Gender-based violence has no place in sustainable biodiversity management, and we want to make that clear. We want to hear what countries are doing. I would just say it's important to keep raising this issue and reminding this, but let's not use biodiversity loss as an excuse. We need to understand what are the drivers of gender-based violence and recognize that we all have a role to play, men and women. Again, it's funny, we have these gender events and there's only a few men in the room. Thank you for joining us. It's essential that you are here. I want to point out what we learned when we're preparing this report was something called the backlash effect. When we look at women's in university settings, women who are studying or working in fields of science, those women who are in female-dominated subjects, disciplines of science, are more likely to experience gender-based violence than women in male-dominated fields in science, or male or female-dominated fields in any other profession. So what we're seeing is this backlash. When we see more female representation, perhaps it's because men feel that their power is being taken away. Perhaps there are many possible drivers. We need to understand that and correct for that. It's not a matter of just having more women present. We need to encounter those drivers of violence in ourselves in order for a peaceful future with each other and with nature. Thanks.
Yes, Tina.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And please do also introduce yourselves when you speak, and maybe a bit louder, because I think with the aircon at the back, we can't hear all clearly. And for participants, do raise your hand in case you cannot hear clearly, or including interpretations, because they're happening online. So we really need to make sure that everybody hears clearly. I think I'm more than loud. Just responding to your question and complimenting on what Catherine was talking about, please take a look, if you have not already, to the CBD's Gender Plan of Action that was adopted. And to also clearly say that that is why we are asking, and what everybody is saying is that we may not have everything now, but let's start. And to say that and hence we are also asking for the support for the methodology, because it does have a question there on gender-based violence, which also is guided by the full gender plan of action that includes the work on CEDAW, if you're talking about, and I think Canada is a signatory to the CEDAW. So there are these elements and there are these actions. So I think hopefully that would be helpful to at least starting from a point. And I'm also asking that as you'll be engaged in a lot of different processes, including the Rio conventions, I would definitely say that I really do like to acknowledge the parties to the CBD convention, that they have taken the step. If it's a small one, but they have. We have a global target on gender equality at the global scale at a convention. And we still need to set the standard in other conventions and like take it forward. So I think it's a start, and I'm so happy to see all of you here, and hopefully like during these 2 weeks we can still touch base with each other and see how the negotiations are, because I think it's not only about remembering that the KM-GBF is one decision of the CBD. In this week, you will see, if you're talking about women's rights and gender equality, you can take them to every single agenda item of this COP. Either it is marine and coastal biodiversity, to invasive alien species, to biodiversity health and climate. So this, what we are presenting, is a start of saying that, look, there was nothing. We have something. It may not be perfect, but let's start. And hopefully this will be developed further. There'll be more guidelines, and this at least will set the stage as a baseline to start from. So hopefully that's helpful.
Thanks, Tina. I think we've come to the end of the session. So we also have Puri from SwedBio, and they have supported us in developing the methodology. So if you could just take the closing remarks, Puri. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minal. Thank you very much, everyone. My name is Ashana Purihert. I'm a program officer leading the climate and ecosystems thematic area at SwedBio. But I'm also the desk officer for SwedBio's collaboration with Women4Biodiversity, and in addition then with UNEP-WCMC as well. And it has been a real pleasure to work with you all. And first of all, on behalf of SwedBio, I would like to thank Women4Biodiversity and UNEP-WCMC for the wonderful work in facilitating this, did you put it, Catherine? It's a work in ensuring the commitment to fulfill the target 23, but also how you link it with the gender plans of actions, which has been also adopted. And second of all, I would like to thank everyone for being here, and all others also for your involvement and collaboration to make this happen, including to parties who have engaged in testing and all in the peer review to allow for the improvements and the updates of the methodology of the indicators itself. Tina, just in your previous intervention, you mentioned let's start, but to be from the outside, I see the starting point has already a while ago as well. And I think, like as many of you know, the journey started a while ago. I'm not going to take it far back, but thinking back to the open-ended working groups, SBI Substa in Geneva, just after the world sort of opened again after COVID, when Women4Biodiversity, among others of their amazing advocacy work, you have focused your work not only in supporting the gender plan of actions, but also how you launched the idea of the gender-specific targets that became Target 23. And despite some reluctancy at the beginning, I personally feel like it was such an amazing experience to witness seeing how the proposal is getting tractions through various discussions on gender and women inclusions, and also even now still here as our distinguished panelists have shared their own experience from at various level. And at COP15, there's like these big celebrations of the adoption of the target, of the adoption of the gender plan of actions. And this indicator just links the two. By how you deep dive into the gender responsiveness of the GBF, but then also specific to the target and the plan of actions. And I'm agreeing again with our panelists here that what we are seeing here is a powerful tool to move forward. It allows us to understand what we're doing, and particularly how do we include women, how we make sure the rights of women, and also within the whole of society approach, which is also mentioned in the section C of the KM-GBF. So these indicators provide really strong potential for better coordination. You mentioned that as well. So it's really an achievement. I have more things, but I think I want to kind of cut it a bit short. And I mentioned the celebration beforehand. I think what we could hope, and I hope it's shared with all of you, that we want to see another celebration in this COP through the adoption of this indicator. Thank you very much, everyone, and I wish you a lovely rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. But we also have Albertine, Miss Albertine from Cameroon here. Miss Albertine, would you like to say a few words? Please, please.
Sorry, these are all the parties who are our gender
Bonjour à tous, je suis Albertine Dili, le point focal biodiversité du Cameroun qui a été récemment nommé. En tout cas, on m'a nommé, ça ne fait pas un mois, ce qui fait que je me retrouve ici avec vous. Et je suis depuis des années le point focal genre du ministère de l'Environnement. C'est-à-dire que je m'occupais déjà du genre dans tous les domaines de l'environnement, que ce soit la restauration des terres, que ce soit les autres aspects, la biosécurité et autres aspects. Et je suis très contente et émue de voir le travail qui est effectué par Women4Biodiversity, parce que j'ai vu les documents qu'ils m'ont envoyés et ce que j'ai vu hier, les documents m'ont vraiment impressionné parce que j'ai compris qu'ici, on ne blague pas, c'est du travail et c'est du sérieux. C'est du sérieux. Concernant les indicateurs, j'ai toujours eu la préoccupation de savoir comment est-ce que j'allais faire pour pouvoir intégrer l'aspect genre et pouvoir faire le reportage plus tard quand on va faire le rapport. Et je crois que cet atelier répond à mes questions. Malheureusement, je suis arrivée en retard, je n'ai pas beaucoup suivi parce que je me suis trompée d'abord de salle. J'ai demandé, on m'a amené dans une autre salle là-bas. J'ai suivi pendant un certain temps avant de me rendre compte que ce n'était pas l'atelier où j'étais. J'ai donc essayé de rechercher. Finalement, je me suis retrouvée. Je suis arrivée à la fin de sa présentation, malheureusement. J'espère que j'aurai les documents. Et quand je regarde le plan d'action genre du cadre de la biodiversité, moi, j'avoue que concernant notre contexte au Cameroun, je suis un peu inquiète. Et quand je regarde même les indicateurs sur les terres et autres, nous savons que particulièrement en Afrique, les femmes n'ont pas accès aux terres. Je me demande donc comment nous, on va faire pour mesurer certains indicateurs qui sont dans le plan d'action genre. Je suis arrivée en retard parce que je n'ai pas pu suivre pour comprendre comment je croyais trouver certaines réponses ici par rapport à la présentation. Donc, j'espère que je pourrai après rencontrer la présentatrice pour qu'elle essaye de m'expliquer certains aspects. Merci. Et je suis très contente de me retrouver parmi vous et de vous connaître, de vous rencontrer. Merci.
For those who don't understand English, I can French. I can just briefly say what Miss Albertine spoke about. She has been newly appointed as the gender focal point for Cameroon. Okay. And she said that she has looked at the metadata, and one of the things that she pointed out was it was a good experience to look at, because when she saw the gender plan of action, it was not very clear as to how to implement it. So the metadata kind of gave an idea of exactly what needs to be done. She was a bit concerned about some of the indicators that are already part of the binary indicator questions, especially on land tenure, because that is a contentious issue in Cameroon with respect to women's land rights. But she's happy to be here. Unfortunately, she was pointed to another room, so she couldn't join us earlier. But she's happy, and she would want to also look at the metadata again to see the changes that have been made. And she supports the event. So thank you so much, Miss Albertine. Thank you everybody for joining. We have lunch, so you can quickly grab it before you head into the negotiations. Thank you, and on behalf of UNEP-WCMC, Women for Biodiversity, to all the parties here, please help us take on the adoption of the metadata. Thank you so much. See you soon.
One more thing, I cannot. I think I'm very touched. I just also want to say that I think our side event is really enriched because we have Nubong, the youngest delegation. It's for her future. That's a good indicator.
Excuse me, everybody. Sorry. Can everybody please gather at the back for a group photo, please? Thank you.